Good evening. Welcome to the December 11th, 2023 General Township Zoning Commission. The time is 7 p.m. We're in Township Hall. Agenda items this evening, zoning case 2023-06, Multi-Sound Studios, first meeting in the 2024 meeting schedule. Present for staff, Joe Schaefer, Director of Development and Zoning, Paul Benson, Deputy Zoning Director. Roll, Mr. Schaefer.
Roll call, Mr. Bernert. Mr. Carter.
Here.
Mr. Leff.
Here.
Ms. Walsh. Mr. Welch.
Here.
And I also note that Mr. Sears and Mr. Wester are also here in attendance.
Good to see you all for the last couple months. There you go. Statement of policy, this meeting may be recorded. Such recordings are public record, may be posted online, and could be subject to review in court. It is as is the adopted policy of the Zoning Commission, all applicants will be granted an opportunity to make their formal presentation. The audience may be then granted an opportunity to comment, followed by the applicant's response and questions from the commission. The chairperson may limit repetitive debate and reserves the following rights: to limit comment to items on the agenda, to limit public comment to 5 minutes per person, to restrict the number of times a member of the public is permitted to speak, and to enact any other reasonable ad hoc protocols or measures necessary to maintain a fair, safe, and orderly meeting. This policy was adopted by the commission to provide for the respectful, constructive, and efficient discussion of business scheduled for consideration and to allow for a proper due process as required by law. Before we get to the minutes, I just wanted to make a quick statement and thank the chief, the outgoing chief, for his service for the police department, and welcome Mr. McMillan, or Chief McMillan, to the staff. So I know there have been some ceremony things that have gone on over the last couple months and some announcements, so I just thought we might say thanks and welcome. So with that, the meeting minutes were sent out by Mr. Benson. Any comments? Modifications?
Chair, I would move to approve the September 11th, 2023 minutes as presented.
I move to second the motion.
Discussion? Roll.
Roll call, Mr. Bernert. Yes. Mr. Carter. Yes. Ms. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Welch.
Yes.
Mr. Leff.
Yes. They are accepted. Time is now 7:02. Daniel Bino requesting approval of a final development plan to renovate and expand an existing building for a service business to be established on 1.206 acres at 6463 Maxtown Road, Westerville, Ohio, 43082, currently zoned Planned Commercial District, PCD, also known as Multi-Sound Studios, zoning case number 2023-06. Anybody speaking on behalf of this evening, please rise and be sworn in. Anybody from the audience, if you're going to speak? All right. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth? So help you God. I do. Thank you. Be seated. The legal notice for this meeting was printed and published on November 29th, 2023 in the Delaware Gazette, posted online at the General Township Hall on November 29th, 23. An attempt to mail notice of this hearing to property owners within 500 feet of the subject property was also made. The following were marked as Exhibits A through H. Exhibit A, legal notice. B, the affidavit of advertisement. C, the sign-in sheet. D, application and plans originally received November 6th of 2023. Exhibit E, the fire marshal letter dated November 15th, 2023. Exhibit F, staff technical review dated November 22nd, 23 for the December 11th meeting. G, the staff memo dated November 22nd, 2023 for December 11th meeting. And Exhibit H, all public comments received between November 6th and December 11th of 2023. Mr. Schaefer, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As some of you know, I'm recovering from an illness, and I still got a bit of a cough, so I'm probably not going to follow the memo exactly in order or not read it verbatim like I sometimes do, especially since I'm pretty sure almost everyone, if not everyone in this room, is pretty well-versed in this project at this point, seeing how this is step 2, and you've already seen the rezoning. So let's dive right in. So speaking of the rezoning, so we're obviously building upon the rezoning that the Board of Trustees approved back on May 4th. This property was residential, now it's commercial, taking a house, converting it into a business for Multi-Sound Studios, where they provide music rehearsal rental studio space. So the building right now is an existing 2,486 square foot structure. They would be expanding it by increasing the height on the 2 single-story wings up to 3,381 square feet as part of the Phase 1 build-out to construct an approximately 4,452 square foot, or I'm sorry, and then there would be an addition that could be up to 4,452 square feet in a Phase 2 portion of the project. with a final enclosed space of 8,216 square feet if this was all to be built out. And then the number of spaces within the building would be 10, the studio spaces, with the ability, with the expansion, to go up to 25. In terms of the surroundings, as we know, this is pretty much a commercial corridor at this point. Across the street is Sonova and Westerville, a big warehouse. To the west is a former house that was converted to commercial long ago. To the east is the J.C. Manning project. And to the north is still residential, single-family dwellings. So in terms of the layout, the home obviously hasn't moved. It is what it is. The expansion hasn't really moved. It is what it is. Really, the most significant change from what the iteration you saw during the rezoning process is the parking lot has flipped locations with the stormwater basin, and there was engineering reasons that the applicant can explain further for that. Staff actually sort of prefers this parking lot location as it eliminates sort of the jog that the previous drive into the parking lot had, and now it's a straight shot drive. Straight into the parking lot, and after much discussion by the board during the rezoning hearing, the applicant landed on the number of parking spaces that are being proposed, both as part of Phase 1 and Phase 2. So what you see here is what was sort of finally determined with the board in terms of the number of parking spaces. The board actually wanted to see a few more parking spaces than the commission originally diverged from, so that was incorporated into the plan back in May. Moving along here, again, I'm just sort of glossing over. The dumpster is, in a mirror location from where it was in the prior iteration. Some of the impacts on the plantings have changed, obviously, with the parking lot now being on the eastern side. There was trees that weren't going to be impacted, they're now impacted, and vice versa in terms of the trees on the west side. The proposed impervious surface coverage for the entire site is 37.47%. This figure takes into account the potential building expansion and the parking spaces associated with said expansion. Westerville has permitted the driveway, and I believe actually it's partially constructed as of this point. The applicant decided they wanted to go ahead and get the apron portion in the right-of-way done. Staff didn't have a problem with that since it's not on the township side of the right-of-way line, but rather in the city right-of-way. So the applicant's gone ahead and started that project, but obviously they can't go through with the rest of building the construction until they get these approvals secured from us. Utilities, nothing's really changed there from the preliminary plan and how that was all going to work. They're still proposing a 6-foot tall brick wall along sort of the rear perimeter of the site, and then some fencing down both sides. Lighting, there are 3 lighting fixtures proposed for the site, one in the northern end of the parking lot, one along the western side of the parking lot, and one along the eastern side of the proposed driveway. An additional fixture would be provided on the eastern side of the parking lot if or when the parking lot expansion is constructed. So you can obviously see where the parking lot expansion would be in the drawing projected on the screen. Anything in the dark gray is sort of the Phase 1 improvements, and then anything sort of that's outlined in the dashed lines and that's in white, you can see would be the Phase 2 sort of future improvements. But again, they are, as far as I'm understanding, seeking to get both of those phases approved as part of this application, with the understanding that as long as they pull zoning permits and get the work started, that they'll be able to meet the time restrictions that they have for getting the project underway. 6 bollard lights will line the sidewalk that leads from the parking lot to the building, which is great for safety. The building will also contain some building-mounted lighting for safety. The fixture designs need to be played with a little bit, as the spec and the materials that we have received wasn't sort of the parallel to the ground flush lighting that we wish to see. So that just needs to be updated. We also need to see the solar study that was done as part of the preliminary plan updated with the new revised layout. The current application materials have nothing regarding signage, so we're assuming that there's not going to be any signage, and I'm assuming that's intentional. Staff's fine with that if they want to just have standard address numbers out here and be sort of more of a low-key operation. The applicant should just know if they do want any kind of permanent signage, that would need to be part of the development plan, and if they want to do that in the future, and it's not as part of this approval, they'll have to come back and amend the plans. No new divergences are being requested. All the following divergences that were, or all of the divergences, excuse me, that were approved as part of the preliminary development plan remain in effect and valid with this application. Scanning through the memo at least, I think I hit all the highlights. Getting into staff comments. Staff does need to see some changes to the development text, but it's mostly just housekeeping things in terms of the text refers to, it's still written as if it's preliminary development plan text essentially as opposed to final development plan text. So it's a lot of just verbiage changes of using the word final instead of preliminary and just those types of updates. So nothing in terms of compliance in those respects. A lot of this is, rest of it's sort of just boilerplate informational language for the applicant in terms of codes that they're bound to, should this be approved, and what the expectations are going forward if this were to be approved. And the fact that they'll need to still obtain a zoning permit from my office, should this be approved, before they can begin any work. I'm gonna move into technical review, because I really feel like that's where the meat of any of the things that we probably need to talk about are. Development review comment number 1, the landscape drawing needs to be revised to reflect the current site layout. I think the old site layout was accidentally left on there. Certain plants shown as remaining are now in the way of site improvements. We obviously know that's not gonna be, those plants aren't gonna remain. We do need to see in the development text and on the landscape plan drawings how parking lot landscape screening, especially along Maxtown Road, is gonna be compliant with Article 20. And I've provided all the subsection references in the technical review there for them to review. We need to have them demonstrate that any of the existing trees being utilized to satisfy any screening requirements are healthy and of good enough quality to provide sufficient screening. That way we're not giving credit for a tree that's dead and doesn't really achieve the intent of the code. Identify that all parking lot landscaping will be protected pursuant to the standards set forth in 2003.05. Identify that any required shrubs will meet the minimum planting height requirements of the code. We already talked about the cut sheets for the building mounted lighting fixture. We already talked about the development text, the solar study I already touched upon. So really, it's primarily landscaping issues, I would say, are the things that, and some housekeeping things that we need to probably take a look at and discuss and possibly have the applicant work on cleaning up. So I promised I was going to keep it brief. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. Mr. Bino, make sure your lights are on, please. Name and address.
Daniel Bino, 6463 Maxtown Road, Westerville.
Jason McGee from 389 Electric Avenue, also in Westerville.
Floor is yours.
Yeah, I guess the text was an oversight, and I have no problem updating that. And then I guess the two biggest issues I saw in the technical review were dealing with the landscape and then the cut sheets for the light fixtures. We have no problem updating the light fixtures. That would just require going back to the MEP engineer. The landscape, it seemed like was the biggest oversight in the submission. I guess before that, going back to the solar study, I guess, Joe, I had a question. I don't know if I asked you now or asked the group, but the solar study, one of the comments was updating the site from the previous submission. Is that a requirement, or if we resubmit this, can we remove it from the set as it was not a requirement to have a solar study included?
Yeah, I'm fine with it being removed from the
Okay.
set since it's not something we typically ask for unless the commission wishes for it to be included and updated.
What is a solar study? Sorry.
It's a drawing that they have in there that shows how the shadows are cast on the site by the sun.
I guess we were trying to show the massing if we go up to a second floor and have the second wing building added to the site, how the shadows would affect the surrounding area. So the site, the driveway, I forgot to update the site plan. However, the actual massing and geometry placed on the site, the only difference, I guess, would be the dumpster enclosure, but there's no changes to the actual massing on the site.
It was probably more important when we were doing the rezoning, we were trying to
Yeah.
understand the impacts possibly on the neighboring properties.
Just curious about that.
Sure.
Thank you.
So, yeah, so that was my inclination, was to remove it, unless there was any comments to not do that. I think landscape, the lighting, there was the question about signage. The last Mr. Bino and I talked, there was, not going to be any signage at the development, and he understands if he plans to put a sign in at the future, that would require a separate permit.
We're, just a quick question, I mean, like, we're considering putting a sign on the building itself. I don't know if this is, I mean, is it something we have to do right now and include that, or we can just,
Well, unless you're gonna come back and resubmit for a zoning modification or a final development plan modification.
got
It
it,
needs to be a part of the plan.
got it. So,
Unless, and I'm not trying to,
Go ahead.
the commission could basically say something along the lines with a conditional of approval being that any signage you want to have, you'll need to obtain a permit for, and we need to comply with the zoning resolution. Obviously, if it didn't, I can't issue the permit for it anyway. A lot of times, the commissions in the past have wanted to see that signage as part of this package and have wanted that to be part of this process, but I do know of other places that basically defer that step and rely on staff as long as it's code compliant signage to just do that. But that's for the commission to decide whether or not they'd want to see those designs incorporated as part of the plan package.
yeah, and again, it's,
Go either way.
yeah, it's something I haven't even shared with Jason, it's just something that I'm thinking is, you know, to do in the future. I wanted to ask if it's something that I have to develop right now. And again, I'm not talking about anything that's a standalone unit as far as a sign, just pretty much like a plaque on the building itself.
Yeah, if you're talking about like just a really small plaque, like next to the door, you might be so small you don't even need a
Sure.
permit. But you know, you do get to a certain size that you do have to pull a permit for, which is usually when we say that you have to include it as part of the development plan package. I don't have a problem if you want to just you want to come back and just amend the plan in the future and do that. I always just want to make sure the applicants understand when you ask me about this, you know, later when you do that, that it's not going to be like a quick turnaround. It's going to be like this process again. So it'll take a few months in order to get it approved and then for you to be able to order the sign and get it on. So there's just some lead time you need to be aware of if that's the path you want to go down.
Kind of like having like you ever been to Carfania's? You saw how gigantic that sign is on the building? It's like a huge sign over there. You could see from an airplane. No, but if anything, we can probably just add it on the building, maybe, for if there is a later date to review it, or we may just scrap it altogether. It's not like something I'm married to, so.
Well, let's ask the question first. If we add it to the plan now and they choose not to put it on, that's not an issue. But if we come back, then we're through the process for a while because we've got to go through percentages and bonuses and all that
Yes.
jazz. So honestly, it'd probably be better to
Right.
do it now before we would give
Sure,
you
makes
approval.
sense. Scrap it. It's not like something we intended to do. I was just asking if it's something we could add later on down
And
the
I
road,
can-
but I understand.
Article
This is-
18 in the code also identifies, again, like, there's certain size of signs that gets to the point where we're like, you know, those little stickers you put on like a door or something,
Right.
we're not gonna make you pull a permit for that. We don't wanna be, honestly, we just don't wanna be bothered with something that small. So, there is gonna be certain signage that you can put up. It's just gonna be very limited in terms of size. But you may find for your purposes, it might meet your needs.
Yeah.
So you can look at Article 18. There's a whole section that talks about, here's all the signs you can do without a permit, and you might find that something there might work for you.
I was just thinking out loud right now, basically. That's all it was. Other than that,
Yeah, and I guess that from what I can tell from the technical review, the largest oversight was a screening for the parking and then the protected landscape element in the review as well. Yeah, I guess those were just oversights. I guess when I was looking at screening, I didn't pay attention to the road and was assuming that the fence along the property lines was sufficient for screening as cars parking, but I did not look at screening along at the front of the property. I think those are the comments that I've got based on the technical review.
Okay. With that, we'll open to public comment. Going once, going twice. Okay, public comment's closed.
Where's Rick?
So, commission, questions to start off with? Who wants to start? Jim? Thank you.
You were talking about the light differences. Is that this light?
Yeah.
That wall light? Okay, because it shines out? Okay. That's all I wanted to know. I think if from what you're saying, I think we could can we incorporate in it, we say a sign in accordance with you and the chapter 18 is allowable, and then you figure it out, and as long as nobody's asking for a divergence, then you guys could just figure it out?
That is an option that you could just say.
I mean,
we're-
I just think
Yeah.
that's good, because why make them come back and do all this? And they want to put something that's maybe a little larger or something and all that kind of stuff.
I was gonna ask if that was possible, so appreciate you asking the question.
Right, exactly. I mean, it just, we're here to serve you guys too, not just, we enforce the rules, but we also like to work that out. The only other thing is, sometimes I don't know, if sometimes they come and there's problems that haven't been fixed yet. I don't know, we can have them fixed before you come to the meeting, so you just tell us like, hey, well, I talked to them, they're all fixed, they're good with it, I don't know, it's just a thought for the future.
Yeah, generally, we try to do that, and I had every intent of making sure they had these comments well in advance of the meeting. I had the email scheduled to go out right before Thanksgiving, and I got back from vacation, and on Friday, I realized it was still sitting in the outbox
No
and never
problem.
got sent.
I just think it
So-
helps the process to,
Yeah.
because usually they're going to comply with what you tell them that they
Yep.
have to do, so.
Yep,
Okay.
so unfortunately, my plan didn't work out this time, but that's usually how this would have probably gone. They probably would have seen it with more notice and had the opportunity
Okay,
to address it, so I blame technology on that one.
that's all I got.
I had also a question about the elevations. It's page 8.3. There's like a lot of single AC units on that building. Like, is there a reason why all these rooms have to have their own AC? And I mean, it looks a little bit cluttered to me.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I didn't go to architecture school to slap AC units like that on the facade of a building, but for his business, it requires pulling out the existing HVAC system so that sound won't travel through the ductwork through each room into the house.
So you have heating, right? So how does that go in?
They're AC and heating units, and then he's
Okay.
got some small baseboard
brackets.
heaters inside of the room that are isolated.
Okay.
So electric baseboard heaters. So admittedly, yeah, it's not
Yeah.
the desirable aesthetic, but for the business, that was the best solution to use.
Okay.
It's a lot of maintenance too.
Well, I'm just can imagine that if you live behind it, I mean, I know there is gonna be a wall. Still, some of these people can probably still see on your property, so they will see this. That was my only concern.
Yep.
And I was trying to be delicate and tuck them away so they're
Are they gonna
less visual or less
Is it like
visible.
enclosed, or is it like purely
No, well, there's like a finished bracket that they slide into, but from the outside, it's not going to be on the magazine cover shoot, it's not something that we want to show off. But we've tried to hide them as best as we can.
And with the, like, you also propose that newer section, and the newer section is at least, like, the intention to do a decent kind of, an AC system that's like throughout the whole building.
Yeah, I mean, we have, that's kind of been removed from the scope for the immediate future, so we haven't talked about that. But I would imagine that there's something a little bit cleaner that we can do for them.
Yeah. I don't know if we can say anything. I mean, is that something in the code, anything about, because I was looking in the code for like AC units, and sometimes, I know in some codes, they have to be like hidden away, like you have to kind of fence them in or something, I don't know.
Yeah, on commercial, we really don't have much in terms of building mechanicals. I mean, obviously, we don't have an architectural review board or an architectural standards. So it's more or less just, over the years, been sort of based on the commentary of the commission, what the applicants have been willing to do or not do. In terms of the design here, at least, it looks like it's, correct me if I'm wrong, it looks like it's on the sides of the building. And a good number of them are at ground level, so those won't be terribly visible at all from, and that house sits so far back, you're probably not gonna see it from the road, I imagine, those ground units. The upper level units, yeah, will probably be a little more highly visible from there, but again, being from the sides and with the way those residential houses are to the rear, I'm not sure there's gonna be like a really great view of them.
Okay.
Except for, I guess you're standing on one of the neighboring properties, but both of those are commercial at this point.
And the other thing, they don't necessarily have to stick out further out. I mean, as far as visually, yeah, we can probably have some sort of like a, maybe a decorative scheme around them, just to implement them so that so it looks a little bit more modernish. But other than that, I mean, like, yeah, they're not necessarily gonna stick that. Like, I'm looking at the drawing, and it looks like they do seem like as if like they stick out more than they should. They don't necessarily have to.
I suppose for some context to the design, we did investigate a couple of other strategies to use in locating those in closets inside the house, well, inside the studio spaces, but the space is already so confined as they are that it really chewed up a lot of real estate on the inside, like the rehearsal space. But it was a scheme that I presented to Dan, and architecturally, I liked it much more from the outside, but yeah, it didn't make sense
do
for Dan.
Yep, we did have this
Did you happen
conversation.
to look at mini-split systems?
We did, well, yeah, the engineer spec'd some of those out, and it became, I think it was cost prohibitive, and then routing it, because we have such a small, like, floor-to-floor height, and trying to route that through, it became not the best way to go. And again, that was another thing that we investigated, and they shot that thing down as well.
You wouldn't be cutting as big of a hole in the side of the building, and from an insulation and a soundproof perspective, I would think that would have been a little.
Yeah, I thought it was as well. I actually thought it was, I started drawing the section and
Yeah.
spent a few hours drawing it up and sending it over to him, but it became not the solution that worked for the space and with the engineers.
Yeah, and the units, again, we do this based on also what we have going in New York, which is pretty much the same thing, in that they're all caulked in condensed and insulated, so there is no gap when they're placed. They're sealed, they're done professionally with an HVAC guy, and again, short of replacing them due to wear and tear, extra, mileage of the unit, they're not gonna be, it's not like a window unit that you can just move around.
Good.
There's one thing I still want to ask Joe.
Mhm.
So if we all agree for the rezoning here today, what is so for the addition, basically, is my question. If we agree on this today, how long do they have this guarantee of putting that addition there? Is it also 1 year? Because I'm kind of confused about how that would work.
Once a final development plan is approved, they have 3 years to pull a zoning permit for
Okay.
it. And then the zoning permits have their own shelf lives
Okay,
that
yeah.
we go off of, and they sort of build up on one another. And then on the zoning permits, I have a little more administrative capability to extend the life of a zoning permit under the code. But yeah, for the final development plan, they're gonna need to pull the non-residential zoning permit for at least phase one within the first 3 years.
That was all I need.
I have no more questions.
So, I mean, I'm in favor of it. I guess, in terms of a vote or whatnot, I'll throw out potential commitments unless Mr. Chair doesn't want to move on this tonight. I mean, I don't mean to be presumptuous, but,
From what Joe said, if we can come to the language agreement, I
Well,
think it's,
I do think there's the issue of the landscaping we probably need to get a little more
okay.
nailed. Not that I ever want to see an application continued, but if this were to be approved tonight, I would not feel 100% comfortable with where we're at with the landscaping, to be candid. I feel like we need to get that probably tightened up a little bit more to demonstrate the compliance and to provide me stuff that I can administer before. I agree. If it was just the signage, I'd be okay, but.
And so I guess I flagged 4 issues based on everybody's comments. Number 1 was to update the language in the final to reflect that it is a final development plan. Number 2, update the landscaping plan to show compliance with the zoning code. Number 3, update the light fixtures to demonstrate compliance. And then, I guess, whatever signage, you can work with Joe to give you enough leeway, but I mean, signage in compliance with chapter 18 of the zoning code, but otherwise, I don't have any issues with the plan as presented with those modifications or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, again, for me, the landscaping is the sticking point, because I'm not sure I could sit and tell you that this plan's compliant in front of you in regards to landscape, because there's just not enough information to make that determination. The other 3 items, I feel like, yeah, we could just make as conditions items of approval, but the landscaping, I think, is the sticking point for me here.
Is the landscaping, can you just say they have to do it before you approve the zoning permit or whatever?
I mean, I suppose if you're,
I mean, I don't know.
if the
Is it
commission
very-
is
it very
comfortable with
complicated?
that,
Pardon?
if the commission's comfortable with that approach, that's certainly a route you could go. I don't know if the board will be comfortable with that approach.
Of the trustee board?
Yeah.
Could they
correct.
fix this before it goes to the trustees?
Yeah, they will have that opportunity.
Okay, I mean,
So you could go that route. That's sort of your in-between, is setting the expectation that it
not
does
very
need to be.
hard, right? I mean, it's,
No, I don't think so. I mean, as long as they don't come back at me with and saying, oh, we can't do this, now we need a divergence, and it's a divergence the commission never got to discuss. That's always what makes me nervous, is we're gonna hit some complication that they can't meet the code, and then it's a change that the commission didn't see, and it could be relatively substantive.
so let's ask, for a timing perspective, where are we right now? I mean, if we continue this a month for you to clean this up and get it back,
Yeah, we have
Yeah, I guess,
a month here, it's then a month with trustees, and getting that on for approval process, so. I mean, 4 things in the landscape piece, that's pretty significant at this point.
yeah, when I saw a technical review come through on Friday, that was, I knew that was the biggest hole that we had here, and wasn't sure how we could address it. I guess exactly what Joe was saying, if the light fixture was no big deal. And I don't, the other things, I don't think we have a problem updating. I guess the only thing I could say to the landscaping is we've been, I guess we're not, there's nothing that we're trying to fight against the landscaping. We would intend for it to be fully compliant. I also understand what Joe's saying, and that, if you say that's fine, and then for some reason we can't comply, I guess that puts you guys in a bad spot.
Why would there be an issue that wouldn't be able to comply? I mean, as far as.
I wouldn't foresee anything, but I guess I've run into enough problems to where,
That's where I'm at too. I don't foresee anything, but sometimes you don't realize until you start drawing the circles on the paper.
having the bulldozers come out in the next 2 months? I mean, were you gonna dig in the spring? In other words, is this a dead period anyways?
We're in no rush to start. I mean, like now with the weather being what it is and
So
naturally.
so if we delayed this for a month, and then it took another month for trustees, you're not losing any time with your business or the bulldozers or anything, is that correct?
That is correct, yeah.
Okay. I would say then let's have them fix it.
I-
bring it
and
back.
I-
That'd be my
We
recommendation.
just bought a bottle of champagne today, but I guess we'll have to put it back in the fridge.
Gonna share? Were you gonna share?
I guess my number one question was assuming that we would have to come back forward to show the landscaping is what's the turnaround time that you guys need for us to submit that for the
Sure.
next meeting? That will
So-
require us to bring landscape consultant back on, so I'm, want to make sure. It seems like tight turnaround for them.
The January meeting's a week later is a little later than normal, so it's on the 16th instead of the first, as opposed to the second Monday. However, so normally under the schedule says you would have until a week from today, which is the 18th. Given sort of the relatively little that I'll have to review once they make this change, I'm comfortable if the commission wants to push that date out a little bit further, especially knowing that Christmas is on the horizon, towards the end of December, if the applicant needs more time. I'd rather have them take a little more time and get it done and get it right, and then just be able to move on with it in January, as opposed to not provide them enough time and then have to do another continuance. So, and again, it's not like I'm having to review 300 homes and a PRD that have been totally redesigned. We're talking about probably some shrubs and trees I just got to count and some numbers I got to add up real quick. So the review itself will be relatively quick, and a new cut sheet for the lighting, and again, that's going to be, look to make sure it's there and move on with it. So I guess I'd ask the applicant sort of what, do you have a time frame you were hoping for in mind?
I guess we had to reach back out to the landscape architect. I know when he initially put this together, it was a very quick turnaround, like a couple of weeks total.
Yeah, good
So.
guy. Yeah, Robert, yeah, he's a good guy.
I guess I feel like 3 weeks would be a turnaround time that, typically from consultants, I can get a 3-week turnaround. And it is relatively minor, we haven't,
So that'd be basically right after the new year, like January 2nd.
The only thing that, wifey and I are not gonna be here in January, we're going to, family affairs overseas. Second week, right, the 7th of January, we're not gonna be here. I don't know if this is something that, obviously, we can draft Robert to do this ASAP. That's not a problem. Will Jason be able to present it, or do we have to be present as well?
There's no requirement for you as the applicant to be here. It's sort of just what you're comfortable with in terms of,
Right,
are you okay
sure.
with Jason just representing your interests?
We trust you. We have a great deal of trust in this gentleman over here. He's done a phenomenal.
You'll have
job,
another
by the
crack with the trustees probably, so.
way.
so I'm sorry, Joe, the next meeting is what day?
The next meeting is January 16th.
Okay.
And I believe that's actually, is that a
Tuesday.
Tuesday because of Martin Luther King
Yep.
Jr. Day? So it sounds like 3 weeks from today, I think, is technically January 1st. I'm assuming your landscape architect takes some holidays, so I don't know if you want to call that the 2nd or the 3rd. The 2nd would be 2 weeks prior to the meeting, which is still more than enough time for me to look at plants, as long as the commission feels like that's enough lead time for you to see it.
I was just thinking about the 5th.
Yeah, I can, if you want to go later too,
Yes.
I think that works too.
From the holidays and gives them extra time.
Give them a little, couple extra days there.
The fifth.
Yeah,
I don't think
I'm
they're-
fine with it if you are.
It's not
Right.
as
You
significant.
can get it all
to-
done and ready for us.
Yeah.
We're good.
It's gonna be probably just a new landscaping sheet. I mean, they're probably not gonna need to give me the whole package. It's probably gonna be new development text, and then the cut sheet, the new landscaping drawing.
The light fixture.
Yeah, and maybe one other piece of paper I'm not thinking of, but the text is probably gonna be the most, and that's mostly just word changes that you'll probably be able to do relatively soon, so. No, yeah, I'm fine with the 5th.
And, sorry.
Sorry. Do you think if they do want to do signage, that they can also put that in there, or?
I don't know who their who they would have doing the signage, so I don't know what the lead time is on their end. I mean, for our purposes, all we really need to know is what type of sign are you doing and how big is it gonna be? We don't, I mean, if you want to, I guess you could ask for the design and, give your thoughts on the design and look of the sign, but, we don't regulate the font or the color or anything like that. We regulate, the size, the type, how it's illuminated, stuff like that. But if you're talking about just like a wall-mounted plaque, I mean, unless you're looking at doing a 100-square-foot plaque, I gotta believe we're probably gonna be able to find something that's gonna work for you.
Hobby Lobby is where we get our signs. And pretty much all furniture is.
Yeah, just look at the sign code and see where you're at.
Sure.
Because there are bonuses based on the road that you're at and the footage. Talk to Joe
Yeah, exactly.
before then. That gives you plenty of time, so. Okay. You got any other questions?
I was just saying, there may even be a chance that I'll call Robert like tomorrow, and he may even just do it over the weekend. I mean, that's how we did it last time. I mean, if the landscape, if we can bang the landscape deal quicker.
Yeah, don't feel like you gotta rush it, because the meeting's
Of
not gonna
course.
happen until the 16th regardless, so,
Got
I
it,
mean,
okay.
it's great that we have more lead time, I guess, to look at it, but, I mean, there's no need, on staff end, there's no need for you to rush it.
And on top of that, if you get it done and have questions, reach out to Joe and make sure.
I mean,
it's
if you get
right
it done
before
sooner,
you
I mean,
come
that's
back, Yeah.
great too, but I feel like the 5th,
Yeah.
especially with the holidays coming up, is probably a good buffer that we're probably gonna want.
Well, yes, and that gives plenty of time to get the 4 issues resolved.
Yep.
Ready? So, Mr. Chair, I would move to continue the public hearing for the subject final development plan application known as Multi-Sound Studios, zoning case number 2023-06, until January 16th, 2024 at 7 PM in the Genoa Township Hall. Additional or revised materials will be due to the Genoa Township Development and Zoning Department by January 5th, 2024 at 4 PM.
I second the motion.
Comment, questions? Mr. Schaefer?
Roll call, Mr. Bernert. Mr. Carter. Ms. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Welch.
Yes.
Mr. Leff.
Yes, motion passes. Time is now 7:42 PM. Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Vacation.
Yes. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Christmas.
Good to see you.
Hopefully it's warm wherever you're going.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, next up is our 2024 meeting schedule.
Yeah, apologies, we're doing this a little later than we normally do, but some of that is probably because we haven't met since September, so. In terms of, I mean, it's pretty much the same old for the most part. There are a couple dates I did highlight there for you and added some notes, so. I don't know if you've heard about it, but there's this major solar eclipse happening in early April, and the county's been abuzz about it for the last several months. In fact, we have an internal meeting tomorrow to talk about planning for it. I guess what happens is we're right at the edge of like one of the primary zones to see it. And what will happen is, I guess in Kentucky a few years ago was just massive chaos. People were pulling off to the sides of the roads when it was happening, and people were like showing up in mass to all these public lands and doing these temporary campgrounds, and all these food vendors were showing up for all these masses of people who were there. And there's a lot of emergency services preparation that needs to go into it, and not so much zoning, because it's pretty much, a one-day kind of thing. You don't really need zoning permits for a lot of that kind of stuff. But we're still trying to be aware of it. But the biggest impact it has on us, it's the same night as what would normally be your meeting. So I am proposing, because of all the potential, I'm not saying it's going to be chaos, but I'm hearing there could be traffic delays and a lot of other stuff.
There's been news discussion about it.
Yeah,
Yes.
that we're probably just best served kicking the whole meeting back a day and avoiding all of it, and just having that meeting on April 9th as opposed to April 8th. And then the other change I made on here is, thanks to college football changing its playoff format once again, we can go back to having the January meeting on the second Monday and not conflict with the national championship game anymore. So I've made that change on the calendar as well. But other than that, I think we avoided all the holidays. We counted all the days correctly, hopefully. Did the commission have any changes there? So I would just like to, if you could, a motion to formally approve it so we can get it posted, and I'll run an ad in the newspaper at the beginning of the year with all the dates.
I move we adopt the 2024 meeting schedule as proposed.
Second.
Comments? Roll.
Mr. Bernert?
Yes.
Mr. Carter?
Yes.
Ms. Walsh? Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Leff?
Yes. All right, we've adopted it.
Wonderful. Let's see, it's been a while since we saw you. What's been going on? In terms, let's talk about applications first. Today was the rezoning application deadline. We didn't receive anything for the next meeting. The final development plan application deadline is a week from today, so I'll follow up with you next week in regards to whether or not we receive anything. I believe the plan is still for that Northgate office project to come back in front of you in January. I haven't heard, I don't believe they've wanted to deviate again from that plan. I'll double check tomorrow to make sure I didn't get that wrong, but I think they're still gonna be on your agenda for January. Basically, what happened there was, after they submitted, they found a tenant, and I guess that tenant requires them to make some changes to the plan, so better now than later, right? So we'd rather deal with it upfront. So that's the story there. In terms of the zoning resolution amendment, I'm in like the polish stage at this point. My team and I have sat down and I've sort of glossed over with them the first half of it, and we need to sit down and go sort of through the rest of it, and they're gonna help me really start to eyeball and look for typos and grammatical things. And there's also some things that I feel like that we need to tighten up, and it's probably some stuff ultimately the commission will help me tighten up too, but my staff's gonna take a crack at it first to try to give me some suggestions. So I'm hoping prior to the January meeting, I can send it out to you. I don't know how far in advance I'm gonna be able to send it out to you, but that's really my target is at least a few days before the January 16 meeting, send you, here's the first blush for us to actually talk about. It has substantially changed since even the sort of sneak peek I gave you a few months ago. But it's all been changed for the better. You know, we continue to experience things, I continue to think about things, and sometimes as I write things, and now I've sat on it for a while, and I go back and look at it, I think I could do this better, I could be more concise, maybe there's a different approach to this kind of things, or I've since learned something that has sort of answered a question I've had about something. So I feel like we'll be at a really good jumping off point to at least start discussions. It's a lot, I'm not gonna lie. We may decide it's too much for one go-around, but we're just gonna have to dive in and see what you think and what you wanna do with it. And then we can, you know, take I guess, as long or as little as we need. I'm not aware the board has given us any kind of deadline that they wanna see something on this. They know we're working on it. But since we've taken care of sort of the couple big issues with the comp plan and the watershed and the density numbers, I feel like now we've got a little more breathing room and the time to take to look at these issues more comprehensively and maybe take a little bit more time. Some of it, the public will be interested in. There's gonna be a lot of it the public's, gonna, like, their eyes will gloss over when they hear about it, and it's not gonna generate interest. So, but, we'll see how it goes. But that's my plan, unless the commission wants to go down a different path.
I just, you'd ask, there were a couple of things we talked about that,
Mhm.
there's like 4 of them, and I'll just say them out loud, then I'll give you this paper. and then
Okay,
we'll
yeah,
just-
great.
It's basically chapter 27, we talked about it before, there's a 3-year limit, but we don't have any guidance on what the heck we're looking for in 3 years.
And
like, we've
that
had
I've
the-
already attacked. Yep.
Right, the Hoover overlay and the density changes all came in and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
The other thing is on the PRDs with conservation,
Mhm.
there is no minimum yard setback. And I think we should probably have something. I think we end up at 12 feet. Is that because of the fire department?
Yes. Now, I can tell you the no setback, that was by design. The trade-off thinking was, you're gonna give us more open space, but we're gonna give you more flexibility on your setbacks. That basically was the concept, and lot size.
But they have to give us 50%, right?
Yes,
So
correct.
I just think we might want a number. in
But we
there.
can take a look at that.
The general comment I get is that they're too close together. I
I'd
mean,
say,
And that's everybody's, I realize.
I'd say anything in the book is, other than hopefully the density numbers, is fair game for discussion.
Right,
So,
gotcha. Did we talk about, the second vehicular thing, with the 30 homes and all this jazz? And
Yeah.
then the sprinklers?
yeah,
Is
and I have
that
a
gonna
solution
be
drafted up
changed?
for that.
Because
too.
it's almost like, we might want to keep in the 30, 30 house thing have a second one, but the sprinklers not be an option, because I don't know. I remember we talked
I have
about
a
the fire
solution,
code.
I have a
Good.
solution for that.
Perfect, great. Lighting. We talked about adding the standard lighting requirements for also rural residential, because we have a lot of rural residential houses, like if you go down Oxbow, for instance. I mean, they're pretty darn close to each other, and to allow people to have lights that don't shine down and don't have the dome, I've gotten a couple of questions about that.
Sure, yeah, we can take a look at that. I have some stuff written up on that.
Okay, that's all I got.
Do we want to fiddle with, or to your point about the 30 houses, access and sprinklers, do we want to address that while we're in the midst of litigation?
I can check into that question. I know the last time we were in this situation, we made changes to the PRD after we found ourselves in that situation, and I don't think it ever became an issue. But I'll look into that, just to make sure we're not
I mean,
accidentally
I
stepping
understand
into
your
something.
point, and I don't
No, I
disagree
mean,
with you,
maybe
but
the timing on it, but it's always good, it's
I'll look
free
in-
call to call the county and
I'll look
ask
into
them
that.
what they think about it. Yeah.
do you know where that is by chance? I mean, I realize it's still fairly,
Where was? I'm
that
sorry.
litigation is?
Status on the litigation.
Oh, I do. I'm not sure, I don't honestly recall all the dates off the record. I know there's documents going back and forth. We haven't reached the required mediation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're
So
still
I-
early.
I know you're familiar with the process, so I don't think that's anything that's not public record. I mean, the whole case schedule is public record, but, I'm obviously trying to refrain from talking about it too much, but, yeah, it's still relatively early in just where things are at with that. So the board's being apprised of it, and obviously staff is being apprised of it, and we see all the documentation.
You done?
I sent Joey some more.
I move to adjourn the meeting at 7:52.
I second it.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Meeting done at 7:52.